Vicki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Welcome to this episode of the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show. I'm your host, Vicki Lowe, and today we're going to be speaking about sleep. Speak to any parent about their experience of parenthood. And inevitably, the topic of sleep comes up, whether it's the question of does your child sleep through the night yet, or what age were they when they did? It can be a pretty contentious issue. And we kind of expect babies to not sleep through the night and for us to have a lack of sleep. But there's almost this unconscious expectation that once our children are a certain age, they should sleep through the night. And if they're not, it can create a lot of guilt, shame and anxiety. And the sleep deprivation that goes along with parenting can be debilitating, impacting our mood, our health, our relationships. And when we add in having to function at work without adequate sleep, then the situation can become chronically difficult. That's why I'm so grateful for this episode's guest to be sharing her wisdom with us. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of the Children's Sleep charity, Vicki Dawson. She set up this charity after her own struggle with children's sleep as a working mum. Vicki is one of the UK's experts on the topic of children's sleep. She's on the board of the British Paediatric Sleep Association and a member of the British Sleep Society. And in this podcast, Vicki shares the common challenges that we can experience with our children's sleep and offers an evidence-based approach to how to deal with that. And I loved her philosophy about there's not one size that fits all, and it's about tailoring your approach based on your own family circumstances, your child, your environment. And so hearing that, I think will be very reassuring for many of you out there. And not only that, Vicki shares some really powerful strategies about what we can do if we're struggling with our children's sleep. And she's also very kindly put together and sharing a document around kind of how to create a successful bedtime routine. And you can download that at wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/24, the number 2 and the number 4. So that's wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/24. And you can download that PDF document there. And I'd love to hear your feedback about this podcast episode. So head over to the Wisdom for Working Mums Facebook page, Instagram or LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, insights and comments on this. Enjoy listening. So Vicki, welcome to the podcast show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
And I think I found out about your charity's work when a friend blogged about a workshop that she'd been on, and her write-up about her experience was so powerful, and I'd not heard of your charity before. It kind of instigated me going, checking out your website and going, I need to get in contact with this charity and have them on the podcast. So thank you for joining me. And it's interesting. This is such a powerful topic, I think, for any parent. And what's quite ironic is literally...
Yeah, it is. I mean, sleep's something that affects each and every one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And literally just before I came onto this podcast, I saw somebody post on social media, another working mum going, I am really struggling with sleep, help. And I was like, oh, actually, just about to record a podcast that might help you. So yeah, very timely. So for those that don't know about you and your work with the Children's Sleep Charity, could you share with us what you do, please, Vicki?
Yeah, so we are a small national charity, and our aim is to support children, young people and their families to get a good night's sleep so that they can be the best version of themselves. And we do that in a variety of ways. So it might be through one-to-one support with families or with a young person. It may be through written information. We also train professionals, so we do a lot of working with health professionals so that they can embed support around sleep in local communities. And we do research and campaigning work too.
Fantastic. And I'm always intrigued to hear people's kind of stories about what kind of instigated them to do the work that they do. So how did you come to set up this charity?
It was through personal experience. So I was a full-time working mum. I was a teacher, and I expected a certain level of sleep deprivation when I became a parent, but I didn't expect it to go on for quite as many years as it did. And what became very apparent to me is that there was just not a great deal of support available around sleep issues. So I did ask for some help from a health visitor, and I was offered a book basically on controlled crying, which didn't sit comfortably at all and wasn't in line with my parenting style or beliefs. But I kind of didn't know where else to go. And it led me to a route of going down to see the GP. And the GP was quite dismissive, unfortunately, and said that children don't sleep and prescribed antidepressants. And at that point, I probably was depressed, but the problem was the sleep deprivation. And it took a long time for me to be able to research about sleep, to try to work out what I could do to help to improve things. And then the more that I started to learn about children's sleep, I recognised that actually there are positive things that you can do. You can make a difference to sleep issues in children. And I started to work with families to explore how this might look. And over a period of time, I recognised that there's so many families out there who are struggling with sleep issues, but maybe don't actually speak about it because there can be a lot of judgment about sleep as well. And I decided that something needed to happen. There needed to be some kind of support in place where parents could be listened to, where their parenting styles could be valued and respected, where they could learn about evidence-based approaches to improving their child's sleep and selecting strategies that they felt would be useful in their home, and some support to go alongside all of that, because it can be really difficult to address sleep issues as well. So that's where the idea for the charity came from.
Wow. And, sorry to hear that you went on that journey, but thank goodness that you're the type of person that wanted to do something about it and then share that with others, because as you say, the lack of resources impacts so many people. And I think what's particularly powerful about the work that you do is I think there's an expectation that newborns or young babies don't sleep, but there's almost this unspoken, I don't know what point it is, that we just expect that children should be sleeping and are sleeping. And I think as parents, if they're not, there's this inherent feeling of that we're failing or we're doing something wrong. And as you say, the judgment, the guilt or the shame that goes along with that. So I think it's great that you're coming to speak about that today. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of judgment about sleep, and there is a presumption that children will be left to cry until they fall asleep. And that's not what we are about at all. We're about reassuring families about sleep patterns, and we don't work with youngsters under 12 months of age because there's so much development going on at such a tremendous rate during that first 12 months. And, infants need to feed often and on demand, and they're designed to be close to the mothers at this stage. But you're quite right, there is so much judgment that it's just nice to have a place where you can sometimes meet other families who are going through similar issues, who are finding that sleep deprivation is impacting on every area of their lives, and who can support each other as well sometimes to overcome, this difficult time.
Yeah, so that's great. And my personal experience was particularly with my second child that just as I was returning back to work, the sleep challenges kicked in. So as this kind of double whammy of actually I was expecting my child to be sleeping better, they weren't, and I was adding work back into the mix. So my need to perform at a higher level, but with lack of sleep, just kind of compounded the issue. So today we're going to be talking about sleep success, which sounds amazing, but could you just share how you define sleep success?
I think sleep success is different for every family. And when we're talking about sleep, what we've got to recognise is that everybody has got very individual sleep needs. So different children, different adults will need different amounts of sleep. We've all got individual preferences in terms of environments we like to sleep in. So things like light, dark, whether we prefer a soft or a firmer mattress. We've all got different ideas, sometimes culturally as well, about sleep. So sleep success is such an individual thing. Part of our work at the charity is to identify with each and every family, child, young person, what does sleep success mean to them? So what do they want to improve? What might be their goal, and how can we support them to achieve it?
I love that. So there's no one size fits all. It's about an individualized kind of plan and approach.
Absolutely. I mean, I constantly get asked for top tips to get a great night's sleep, and there are generic things that you can do. But one of the main skills that our sleep practitioners have is actually doing an assessment on each individual case and working out what may be contributing to the sleep issues, and then coming up with the strategies. And that's something that we often miss as parents. We kind of go in with the strategies right at the very beginning, and we'll do things like a bedtime routine and then go, well, it's not worked. Or we'll put a child in a completely darkened environment because we've read about blackout blinds being really good for sleep, and then it may not work. And this is because we've all got very individual needs, and we need to be looking at it as a very bespoke package of support.
Yeah, that's great. So clearly you've got a lot of experience now of listening to people's sleep challenges and helping them. What are the common challenges that you hear from parents?
It can be settling to sleep at the start of the night. So we can have children who are not presenting as being tired. So one of the main symptoms that we do get of sleep deprivation in children is hyperactivity. So therefore, there can be a belief that this child simply isn't tired at bedtime, and that actually they just do not need as much sleep as other children. We can get resistance around bedtime at the beginning of the night as well. So the children who will come up with strategies to delay bedtime or to prolong that bedtime routine. And then when they do get into bed, it's really difficult for them to fall asleep, and they may need a parent to stay with them. And then we've got the children who are waking up throughout the night and needing some sort of parental attention to be able to get back to sleep. And then, of course, we've got those that wake up and start the day at a very early time. So they're 4 a.m., 5 a.m. Children who are up, ready to begin the day at a very, very early point.
And then go on.
Oh, sorry. And then as we move through into the teenage years, of course, we've got the delayed sleep phase. So we've got the teenagers who are not releasing the sleep hormone until later in the evening. So they may genuinely not be ready for sleep until the early hours of the morning. But then the big difficulty that parents can have is getting them up in the morning to be able to be in time for school, and particularly if parents are working and these are older teenagers, it's the concern about, will they get up this morning if I'm not there to be able to support them in doing that?
And it's interesting, as you talk, my children are young, so I can't yet relate to the teenage years, but I can kind of relate to perhaps all of those different areas that you talked about in terms of settling to sleep, the hyperactivity, the resistance, the waking up at night, and the early wake up. And I'm sure many people listening to this will also probably be listening and nodding along. So for me, it's reassuring to hear that those are common. So I suppose the next piece is around, so what advice can you offer to anybody that's listening if they are experiencing any of those challenges?
I think the most important thing is to take some time away from bedtime to reflect on what's going on. So it might be that you keep sleep diaries to see if there are any patterns around the sleep. and to try to think about what may be the actual trigger for the sleep issues. And we are often not educated around sleep. So part of the work that we do is around empowering parents, children, young people with sleep knowledge, because we talk about children sleeping through the night, but actually we don't sleep through the night. We have a number of partial awakenings every night because we sleep in cycles. And one of the most important things for our sleep is that everything is absolutely consistent. So the conditions that we go to sleep in at the start of the night are consistent throughout the night, so that when we do come to these points of partial awakening, we're able to just turn over and continue to sleep. So if something has changed, that's the point when we're more likely to wake up. So it can be things like a parent putting a child to bed with the landing light on, and then the child goes through sleep cycle, comes to a point of partial awakening, the landing light's gone off, they're suddenly in darkness, and then they may wake up fully at that point. So consistency with sleep is incredibly important. And another important element is light and dark. They play really important roles in terms of body clocks. So we need darkness to produce the sleep hormone, melatonin. So that's why it's important to sort of dim the lights and to avoid screen times in the hour leading up to bedtime, because screen activity can actually suppress the sleep hormone. So light and dark, very, very important. Really good to get into daylight, if at all possible, for half an hour each morning to sort of strengthen the child's body clock as well.
So that almost kind of teaches them the difference between night and day and produces the right hormones.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah. And this is where the routine sort of comes in. So as a parent, I was very aware that everybody said, you must have a good bedtime routine, but I didn't quite understand why it was so important. And what we are trying to do is we're trying to support the body clock, and we are trying to do the same things at the same time each day, to produce as much of the sleep hormone as we possibly can. So using darkness to create that, avoidance of screens, using relaxing activities. And then likewise in the morning, it's really important to have a set wake up time so that you are supporting the body clock at the other end of the day. And that will help children to get their body clocks really on track. And the difficult thing about that as a parent, but particularly as a working parent, is sometimes at the weekend it would just be so nice to have a lie in. And I've done it in the past where I've decided I'll keep them up for an extra hour tonight so that I can have an extra hour in bed. And what we know is actually all that does is it tends to deprive you of an hour's time the evening before, and they still get up really early the next morning. Yeah, so it doesn't help. And then they become sleep deprived the next day, and then they are more maybe difficult to manage during the daytime. So actually those set wake times, even at weekends, are really important when we're working with children who have got sleep issues.
And that was actually, as you were talking, one of the things I was reflecting on is how often I know I have gone through the, Monday to Friday, particularly if they've got school, we've got a kind of a really set routine, and how you relax a little bit more of the weekend. And whenever I've done that, I've kind of gone, when will I learn my lesson? It doesn't work keeping him up later. It only comes to bite me on the bum, because the emotional regulation the next day, perhaps for both of us, if we've, missed some sleep, is, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes we do things as parents, like we will say, if you are good, you can stay up an extra hour, or as a treat, we're going to have a late night. And one of the things that we're trying to do at the charity is to make sleep positive to children. So one of the things that I considered is what point is it where you kind of look forward to a good night's sleep? Because most children, if you talk to them about sleep, will feel that they're missing out on something or that it's boring. And actually, we need to be educating them into thinking that it's great. It helps us to meet our full potential. If you're good at sport, it can help tissue to repair to the body. It can help you to be faster. It can help you concentrate in school better, feel calmer. It can even help children to grow. Like sleep is just the most amazing superpower, really, that we can pass on to our children. So that's part of our work as well. And we're working on a piece of theatre at the moment that's going to be touring primary schools next year to positively promote sleep.
Because it's interesting, isn't it, that I found as a parent, I will protect or try and protect my children's sleep above anything. But I sacrifice my own and realise that actually I'm not role modelling what I'm expecting and know is good for my children. And that might come out in my language. So I think that's brilliant that, saying that sleep is a superpower.
Yeah, it is. It's about how we make it positive. And if you've had a child or if you've got a child who's got a sleep issue, bedtimes can become a really negative time. And part of the work that we do is to try to make bedtimes positive again. So to fill them with positive language, to fill them with positive activities that children are going to enjoy engaging in with their parents in the run up to bedtime, so that everyone's having a much better experience. And the feedback that we get from families is actually it's transformed the evenings. It's not a time that we dread anymore. It's a time now that we look
so much anxiety about will they sleep, will they go to sleep, and I imagine the children feed off that. So what might be some of the positive experiences that you can do with a child as you lead up to bedtime?
So it's the hour before bedtime that's really key in terms of the routine. So we will look at things like, does the child need to have a supper time snack, and what might that be? So it might be something around dairy products if they are okay to have that. It might be some sort of low sugar cereal that's helpful, something like porridge, something that's going to keep them full so that they're not waking in the early hours because they're actually hungry. We also look, as I said, about the lighting, so dim the lighting. And a great thing that we found on a recent research project was to advise families to make a bedtime box. So to consider what sort of activities does your child enjoy doing? What are they interested in? And then putting together some activities within this box that only comes out at this particular point in time. And activities that can be particularly helpful are things like anything that involves sort of hand-eye coordination can be really helpful to promote relaxation. So colouring in, jigsaws, model making, anything like that, threading, sort of jewellery making, all those sort of fine motor skill activities can really help to feel calmer. And then what we would look at is whether a bath would be appropriate. And if so, around about half an hour before bed is a good time, because the bath increases body temperature. And then when we get out of the bath, our body temperature slowly starts to decrease, and it's this decrease in body temperature that helps us to drift off more easily. And then having some time in the bedroom with the child, so it depends on the age of the child. Some children prefer to read or listen to a short audio story. If a child is still enjoying sharing a bedtime story with a family member, then that's a great way to end the day. So having sort of 10 minutes to read a story together, or perhaps end it on a real positive note. So one of the things that I do with my little boy is we end the day by sharing our 5 happy things. So what are 5 happy things that have happened to you today? And what are 5 happy things that has happened to mum today? And that's just a really nice way to sort of finish up the day with some quality time before we do the whole
and that whole gratitude piece, setting your child up for the future as well, about reflecting on what's gone well. I think that's brilliant. So if somebody listening goes, that's all sounds great, and there's actually some strategies there that I can really, really apply. You mentioned earlier about some children have resistance then to the bedtime piece, maybe going to sleep on their own. What, from your experience, helps with that kind of transition?
This is where we would go very much into a bespoke programme, and we would speak with the families about what they think might help, because our belief is that parents are the experts on their own children. So we would talk about things like if a child needs a parent to stay with them at the start of the night and then they're waking throughout the night, it's possibly because the parents left the bedroom and they actually need the parent to be able to go back to sleep. Some families choose to co-sleep, and that's a choice. And if families are choosing to co-sleep, then that's absolutely fine. We will be looking at the Safe for Sleep guidelines by Lullaby Trust for infants. But when it comes to older children, if that's what a family want to continue to do, then we work very respectfully for families to continue to do that. And we will look at the routines, the environment, and how best we can support that to continue. If we've got families who are not choosing to co-sleep but have sort of found themselves co-sleeping, then we will work with them to gradually sort of stop the co-sleeping, but very gently. It depends again on each family as to how quickly parents feel that they can gradually get out of the bedroom. So you might have heard of things like the disappearing chair, where you start off maybe in the bed with the child, and we've had families where we've had to work very, very slowly in terms of the family might actually sleep on a mattress next to the bed initially, just to get the child used to not having the contact during the night, but having full reassurance that somebody is there, and then very gradually moving out of the room. The key thing is that the parents are responding to the child, so offering reassurance and that they can see that the child is okay. We might put in things like family photographs in the bedroom, because often children's bedrooms don't have any photographs of the family. Yeah. For some children, we've given them something to save of one of the parents underneath the pillow, and that's helped them to just remind them that the parents are coming back in the morning. If they can't understand that they're coming back for them, it may be that they can understand that they're going to come back for this special object, whatever it may be. Put in things like a T-shirt with the parents' scent over the pillowcase, so that they can smell the parent is still kind of around. So lots and lots of different things, just depending on the child and depending on the way that the families want to proceed with it all.
There's lots of amazing strategies that you've mentioned there, and you kindly said before we started recording that you actually have a bedtime routine kind of download document that you're happy to share for this podcast, and I'm assuming it kind of summarises what you've talked about.
Yeah, that's right. I'm more than happy to share that. And I think what families need to do is to recognise that there is no one set routine. What they need to do is to take the information and to make it work for their sort of lifestyles, for their parenting. So take the aspects that work for them and use it accordingly.
Brilliant. And for people who want to access that, I can signpost you to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/24, because this is episode 24. So the number 2 and the number 4. And that's brilliant. So we mentioned earlier about kind of there are some unique challenges that potentially working parents have on top of the generic sleep challenges. What might they be?
I think working parents have got a number of additional challenges, and I've certainly experienced this because I've been a working parent throughout my children's young life. I think the difficulties can be sometimes in terms of guilt, and we feel guilty at going out to work, and then when we come home, in my experience, I've been trying to fit a full day's engagement in with a child in an hour, 2 hours, and therefore the evening routines can become very prolonged. I also think that sometimes people can be very judgmental about families working, and that sometimes that makes it difficult to seek support and to talk about the sleep issues. I certainly felt very guilty, as if I wasn't working, then maybe none of this would have happened, and it was my fault. I think sometimes our children may be accessing additional services at night time, so activity clubs, and they themselves may not get the wind down time that they may need. And then when you do get them home, sometimes, depending on their age, you can start to have to do things like reading books, homework, you're trying to prepare dinner, you're trying to get uniform ready for the next morning. So there just seems to be so many tasks to try to get through in the evenings that it can all become a little bit hectic and not as calm as it really needs to be to promote sleep.
Yeah, and I can imagine so many people, including myself, listen to this going, yeah, can relate to that. You're trying to condense a lot into those kind of that time after work, and also feeling perhaps guilty that you've not spent as much time. So perhaps keeping your child up later than you would normally do. So yeah, I can really relate to that. And I imagine that's where your work is so powerful, because it's taking those individual kind of structure of days and routines into consideration when you're supporting families.
Yeah, we look at sort of every aspect of the family's life as well when we put programs together, because it's really important that when a family has had contact with us, that they are able to go away with something that can work for them. So everything is looked at in terms of where the child is during the daytime, what routines might be in place there, what time meal times are, what actually needs to be done in the evening routine, in terms of what the parents need to do to be able to prepare for the next day, and also what we need to get done with the child to make sure that they have got the best chance of falling asleep at an appropriate time as possible. So yeah, there's lots and lots of assessment done in order to be able to come up with the best program that we can to suit.
And I know you mentioned earlier that from your own experience, you've actually made the decision that if you're working late, it might mean that actually you have to personally sacrifice seeing your child to make sure they get the sleep that they need. Would you mind speaking a little bit to what you shared kind of before we hit record? Because I think that was quite a powerful point.
Yeah. So as a working mum, there have been occasions when I would come home and my little one would be already asleep in bed, and I would have to actually leave the house the next day and they would still be asleep in bed because I got an early start. And there were points where I may not see him awake for a couple of days, and that's really, really tough. And everything in me wanted to keep him up so that I could see him, so I could enjoy him. And I had to make a really difficult choice, and to remind myself about why sleep is so important for him, in terms of his well-being, in terms of the fact that he needs to function well at school. He needs to get enough sleep so that he can concentrate well, he can consolidate his learning while he's asleep, he can release the right hormones to support growth, weight, all these kind of things. So there's no simple solution around it, and it's really tough sometimes. But I justified it by thinking that actually I was doing the best for his health and well-being by ensuring that he had got enough sleep. And my need to see him had to be secondary to that, because I knew that actually he was having a great time with Dad, his brothers, at school with his friends. He was in a good place.
Yeah, and it's almost like not letting our guilt guide us to do well-intentioned things that actually undermine the sleep, and I imagine create that downward spiral of trying to get successful sleep.
Yeah, and I think as well, this comes back to how we value sleep in society. So we wouldn't ever sort of deprive a child of food as a treat. Yet we do use sleep as, in a very different way. But when we become educated about sleep and we recognise that the consequences that sleep deprivation can have, my hope is that we will feel less guilty about things like promoting a child going to sleep at an appropriate time rather than keeping them awake to see us
Brilliant.
as
I love the
parents.
message that you're
it
spreading.
Is so difficult.
So, as I say, you've shared some brilliant stuff, so thank you for that, Vicki. If there was just one thing that you hope that a working parent who's listening to this podcast takes away, what would that be? It
would be, don't feel guilty. You're not alone if you've got sleep issues. We work with many thousands of families each year, and many of those are not working parents as well, and sleep issues touch everybody. So we work with the most disadvantaged and vulnerable families. We also work with the most affluent families. It's something that happens to everybody, and take some time to come up with a plan when you've got time to think about what you can put in place, and just take a little bit of that pressure off yourself, because I do think that as working parents, we put ourselves under an immense amount of pressure at times.
Brilliant. That's a really reassuring message. So where can people find out more about you and what you do?
We've got a website, so people can find out more about our work there. And we are also on Facebook, and that's where we tend to share a lot of news about our latest funding and where we're able to offer support across the country. And we're on Twitter too, so any of those channels, families will be able to find out more about what we're up to.
Brilliant. And I'll put all the links to that in the show notes. And as mentioned, if people want to find more about the bedtime routine strategies, they can head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/24. So the number 2 and the number 4. Thank you, Vicki, for not only joining us on the podcast, but for doing the work that you're doing, because it is so important. And I imagine there are many families out there who are grateful for the work that you're doing. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.